I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Benjamin Cleary, the writer and director of the new film Swan Song. And this is such a fascinating concept for a film with this man who is dying and decides to clone himself so that his family basically doesn't have to grieve. And it's such an interesting idea to think about. And I'm curious, as you were developing the story, how much were you actually thinking about what you would do in this situation?
Well, thanks for having us, Kevin.
Mhm.
Love the work that you guys do, and great to be here. Yeah, I all the time. I mean, that was it from the script all the way up. The movie originates from a pretty personal place. I lost three friends when I was younger, when I was 19, 20, 21, three summers in a row. Um, Three friends passed away, and sort of the in the aftermath of that, you see the grief that spreads out to everybody who's left behind, and not getting a goodbye and things like that. I think it's and from my personal point of view, at a young age, going through that actually, in the years that came, I started to really just constantly catastrophize about what would happen if someone I loved passed away, what would happen to my family if something happened to me. And I think all of these things, as a writer and a filmmaker, they end up bubbling up from the subconscious, and a premise like Swan Song that you just outlined um, comes up. So in a sense, I'd been thinking about things like that for a long time, and then really as the premise developed, I started to think about it more focused. But it was the what would you do of it all was kind of always on our mind. And I think finding a character like Cameron, whose subjective journey, we're following, and all the forces that are on him about should he or shouldn't he do this, morally, emotionally, what's the right thing to do. That was kind of what drew me to the story. And the idea of him having to try and decipher if this other him is truly, an authentic version of him. As I developed the story and realized that was going to be a vehicle in which we could bring in, weave in a love story, really explore the entire breadth of a human life, think about the sort of fleeting beauty of our time here, and loss and grief and joy in a way. That was what really hooked me in and made me know I kind of had to make this film. But it was all linked to that thing you bring up, which is me thinking personally about what I would do in a situation like that.
Yeah, and it certainly got me thinking about it as well. But
Okay.
this is set in the future. That's one big aspect of this, but it still shares some of the stuff that we have in terms of modern conveniences, but obviously with a number of advancements. What kind of research process was there for you as far as like where technology is going and all the aspects of cloning? Like how much of what we see is what you found to be realistic for what we might see in the future versus what you've just sort of made up for the purpose of this story?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a meticulous preparation. That's part of my the way I write and then make the film. All the way along, there was a huge amount of research done, and in a sense, I think what the film is like sort of like the tip of an iceberg, and the roots beneath it. We never really see, but hopefully feel their authenticity in what is shown on screen. But the research I did, I mean, it begins with reading, looking at things online. But then as we started to progress, it was talking to experts, futurists, people who were really ingrained in this world, in AI, and what's going to happen and develop over the coming years. And the amazing thing was that every single person I talked to, with all of the elements of tech that were in the movie, said it's a matter of when, not if, right? That this tech was going to happen. We had a wonderful person on our team who was, Ishan, who was involved heavily with the world building of it all, and putting together an entire world building doc. Like, it's this huge document that goes through all of the technological elements in the film and talks about the different ways they could unfold, and all of those things, and to each little bit of tech that we used, the earbuds, everything. So I was armed with all that knowledge. And then I think as a filmmaker, what you've got to do is decide how much of that you want to show. And for me, it was never about pulling back the curtain and, you know, hearing what the scientists were talking about or seeing how they do the molecular duplication and things like that, right? Because I felt that would sort of rob from the human story at the heart of this. And so the world building that, you know, I wanted to create was such that we would hopefully seep into, you know, believing that this kind of technology exists in this near future, but never feel like this world was drifting too far from, you know, our reality today. The tech was all one click on, and all of the aesthetic choices. You mentioned you spoke to Annie, our wonderful production designer, and she was just an amazing collaborator in working out ways we could make things feel grounded. You know, I think my team got probably tired of me saying too sci-fi with loads of it, because I was really trying to just bring it back into a relatable world. So yeah, that was the way it sort of unfolded.
Yeah, the visuals of the film are just very interesting because we do have like the AR screens popping out, a lot of those more digital elements. But yes, there are like these sweeping shots of nature and this secluded area where the facility is hidden away. And there is this sort of contrast happening of the natural and also the artificial. How much did you want to explore that as just like as a core concept outside of the general concept of the film?
Oh, that's great. It's great that you're picking up on those things, because that was really a big part of the conversation. Some of my earliest conversations with Annie were about that, like how to bring the themes of the film into the visual aesthetic, right? And same with Masanobu, our wonderful DP. You know, how to explore that even in a wide pacing shot, right? What does that say about the film? You know, seeing Cameron, this tiny figure with a huge mountainous landscape, you know, all on top of him. You know, how does that explore the theme? And I think that in terms of the nature versus artificial of it all, there was just so many, all of our choices went into trying to create that, right? You'll see little bits of the materials that we used, right, to try and explore sort of organic, you know, real elements, and just to try to always in each shot think about how we could contrast artificial and real, even the backgrounds that are behind a certain character at a certain time. You hope that it's speaking to the themes, you know, seeing Jack go upstairs for the first time, that light, you know, that natural light just washing across his face. You know, there's moments like that where you think about, you know, but the door is this artificial rotational door, and then the light hits him, and that dichotomy between real and artificial was very important for me to try and get in throughout the film. And the reason, I suppose, why it's not really like a style over substance thing, in a way, it's more because that's at the heart of Cameron's dilemma. You know, he's trying to decide if this other him, this technically kind of artificial in a sense him, is truly authentically him. And so it felt like imbuing the film with as many of those explorations visually as we could was important.
Right. And you also have Mahershala Ali here, who is a great conduit for us, I guess. And he's probably one of the best actors working today, period. How did the two of you sort of collaborate to figure out the right approach he should take for Cameron? And I guess actually both of the performances we see here from him.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I could speak about the collaboration with Mahershala for a long time. I'll try and not spend the rest of the interview talking about it. He is just incredible. I remember, you know, our first meeting, sitting down with him, and just, he's such a wonderful, warm soul, but he's an amazing filmmaker. He's got a great mind. The way he was talking about the characters and the story from that first meeting was amazing. I remember one of the first times we really started speaking about the characters, I remember he was talking about the internal differences, right? Because they're so they're totally identical visually. So we've got to think about the internal world. And I remember we started getting into it, and he said something about, well, the weight of the world is on Cameron's shoulders, and Jack is now not sick, and so he was talking about their lungs, would the lungs feel slightly heavier of one than the other, and hearing an actor get into that beautiful level of sort of intricacy, I just knew I had a collaborator there that was going to go all the way, and the nuance that he managed to create, and the way we know straight away when we see each character somehow that who is who, I think was just an incredible feat of acting, that he did. And, we just, we spoke just a huge amount about a huge amount about the questions at the heart of the story, on set. We would have these long, really interesting conversations about what each character was going through that would inevitably dovetail into speaking about some of the philosophy behind it all. And then I'd start to see little things sort of, pop into some of the choices he was making and the performance he was crafting. It was really it was quite a joy and an education in a way to watch.
Yeah. And obviously there's this technical component here of having both Cameron and his clone sometimes in the same shot, with him acting opposite himself. First of all, what is it like to actually direct a scene like that? And also, how did he you sort of talked about it a little with how he modified things, but trying to make a conversation feel seamless,
Yeah, it was a huge technical challenge in it. And again, it goes back to a lot of preparation. And what I was saying to my team was that I really wanted to try and work out a way to shoot all the double scenes in as untechnical a way as we could. So I ruled out motion control really early on because it can be cumbersome. It's an amazing technology, but what I really wanted to try and do is create the space for Mahershala and the time for Mahershala as much as possible on set, and not be worrying about, oh, we've got an hour delay with this bit of technology. We used a repeatable head for one scene. We had to do it. But aside from that, it was old school. It was stitching pans. It was split screens. It was over the shoulders. There's a little bit of face replacement and a couple of wides, things like that. But I was really just trying to, and I think my big job as a director was to try and make it as untechnical as possible, because the roles were so demanding. There was so much emotion in those scenes with themselves. So I really wanted to create that space. In practice, as we did it, we had this wonderful actor playing the double for Mahershala, Shane Dean, who was just so generous and such a great teammate, that he and Mahershala, when Mahershala was doing the first side, say, of Cameron, Mahershala would start to predict what he was going to try and do on the other side. And he'd have to sort of speak to Shane a bit about some of the things he was going to do. And they'd start to work that out. And then as we got a bit of flow with that, I'd go in and we'd then start to craft it a bit together. And then we'd sort of work it from there. And then an amazing thing we started doing that was really useful was I would take the audio that Mahershala had from his take as Cameron, right, on the first side, and I'd actually play that back as he was acting as Jack, then for him to act to his own audio. And sometimes I'd mix up the takes, use different takes to keep it fresh for him and stuff. But what was really amazing about that was just there was a cadence and a rhythm. Mahershala has such an incredible sense of rhythm and cadence in how he performs, that was preserved, I think, as we started doing that. So that was one of the techniques, I think, that helped to actually make it feel like quite a nice organic flow. And in the end, I think some of those scenes that you see together that just, feel so seamless, and the team did such a good job to do. Really, I think that we hopefully preserved that cadence.
Definitely. Yeah, it feels very fluid, I must say.
Thank you.
And even outside of Mahershala, this is a pretty great cast that you've assembled. I mean, we have Naomi Harris, Oscar nominee, Glenn Close, a legend, 8-time Oscar nominee, Aquafina, one of the biggest stars right now. But none of these characters, I don't think, actually ever meet each other. They're all sort of connected by Mahershala's character. So what kind of conversations were you having with all of them kind of individually, either about the concept or the tone of what you were looking for, just to make sure, that they're all sort of dialed in and a part of the same film, essentially?
Yeah, well, they all have this really important part to play within, you know, Cameron's sort of journey, right? And it was really important. You know, we spoke a bit earlier about like the forces, you know, acting on Cameron, and I think that they're embodied in characters like in Joe Scott, you know, like in Poppy, like in Kate. I think with Naomi, I mean, watching her work and watching what she and Mahershala did and the chemistry they had was just incredible. We would I've said this in a few interviews already, but it was just like I'd be behind the camera watching the scene unfold, and it would completely surpass what I had imagined for it. And I'd be like, you know, wiping when I call cut, I'd be wiping my eyes, and I'd look around and see a whole room, a whole crew, just all with tears in their eyes, watching what they were doing. So that was incredible. I think that what we, you know, what myself and Naomi talked about early on was connection to the story. I think there were some technical elements in it, right? There's the musical side to Poppy, and they were things that we were kind of preparing, and we were talking about the level of grief that she had gone through with her twin, and you know, I was kind of sharing some articles that I thought might be useful, backstories. I love to suggest character backstories and see if they spark ideas for the actors, and I love to improv. We did a huge amount of improv with Poppy and Cameron scenes in the snippets, not in the larger scenes like the train or anything, but in the snippets. And so that was really, that was kind of it. I think the best thing we did was, and I fought for this because I felt it was going to be important, but our first day of shooting, we did a half day, totally improvised day of just the wedding, right? And I was giving little sort of scenarios, and Mahershala and Naomi were taking them and running with it. And I felt like that was going to be really important to just set the tone for the love story at the heart of it. And what I wasn't prepared for was just how incredible the chemistry would be so quickly. They just immediately, we were all like, wow, this is amazing. Sorry, I'm totally kind of veering off your question, but that was just, it was an amazing experience working with Naomi and seeing what she did. She goes straight in, no rehearsal. We shoot the rehearsal. She's right in. Her and Mahershala are incredible teammates, sort of just pushing each other to great things. I think for Glenn, she had a really difficult role here because what I really felt with it was that we needed to make sure she had a neutrality to her that was very hard to read. And that's actually very difficult to do, to kind of stay in that place where we don't really know whether we trust her or not. And that goes, you know, no spoilers, but, you know, we don't find that out until very late, whether we do or not, right? And I think she handled that with just it was just wonderful seeing how she navigated that and found that. And actually one of the things that emerged, I mean, Glenn's amazing. She came up with some beautiful backstory ideas that were kind of, as she calls them, secrets, which were so useful in fleshing out that character. And she also, I think, the relationship that developed between her and Jack and her and Cameron, I think in the hands of an actor like that, with the subtlety she brings to it, you really feel that. And I was feeling that develop as we shot and leaning into that more, going, oh, wow, actually, of course, her relationship with both of them would be slightly different. And maybe she's rooting for one more than the other, or whatever way you want to phrase it. So that was amazing to see. And then for Aquafina, her role is such an important role, even though it's not a huge amount of scenes. The levity and the humor that she brings to it, I think, are really important for a movie like this that does have some heavy topics. I do personally think it's a film with joy and hope, but it does have some heavy topics. But the way that she and Mahershala navigated those scenes, where 1 minute it's kind of a heavy moment, and then on turning on a dime, she just brings in that levity, and they got those comedic beats so well. So I saw her in The Farewell, whenever that was a few years ago. I just thought it was incredible, and was so lucky that she and the rest of the cast signed up to do this. As a first-time filmmaker, I feel insanely lucky to have gotten to work with all of them and the rest of the cast. I mean, it was just it was magic.
And I think that's a great note to end on. We're out of time, sadly. I could talk to you for another 20 minutes, but I'm sure you have other things. But for those of you watching, subscribe for more interviews and go to goldderby.com to make your Oscar predictions. Yeah, congrats again on the film, Ben, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.